So you would like to know how to make a mosaic using found and recycled objects. Well, you're in the right place. I'm Helen Miles and I'm here to teach you all the tips and tricks you need to make mosaics. We're going to be looking at how to make a mosaic with found and recycled materials. So the first thing to do is to look at the kind of materials I mean. I'm going to use a real mixture so you can get a sense of how wide and varied and kind of frankly quite exciting the materials are that you can use in mosaics. This tray is just a mix of things of a similar colour and tone. So I've got pebbles, I've got old rusty bits, these washers, and I've got some seed cases and seeds. And when I use organic materials like this, I will put them in the oven at a very low heat for maybe 4 hours, just to make sure all the moisture has gone before I put them into a mosaic. It's really nice to use single-purpose plastics as well. This is just a selection of things, caps, covers, needle covers. My father had diabetes, so he collected all these, and I found them very helpful. And if you need to cut them, you just use simple wire cutters like these. We're also going to be using crockery. I've got a great stash of pots, old pots, which were found on the beach. So some of them are really worn and lovely, but obviously you can use any old broken mug or plate that you have at home. Shells are an obvious choice. You can get all kinds, of course, all kinds of colours and sizes and shapes and textures. Were absolutely wonderful to use in mosaics. Just because the beaches near me often have these big flat shells, which have some amazing colours on them, and then I cut them down with ordinary nippers or compound nippers. So I'm going to include those in the mosaic. Buttons are great. Someone gave me this wonderful collection of various buttons. Oop, and here's some bottle caps that I've got in there as well. They're very useful. Old COVID tests. I think we all have plenty of these knocking around, or we would do if we'd collected them. Again, I can cut them very easily with the wire cutters. And pebbles. Who doesn't have a stash of lovely pebbles at home? These pebbles are not probably the loveliest you've ever seen, but I've chosen them because they're the right depth and and they're reasonably flat. So you can use thicker pebbles. They don't all have to be flat and relatively thin, but sometimes it's nice to have ones which are. So I'll show you when I'm making the mosaic how you can use a huge variety of thicknesses. The main thing you have to think about though is to have at least one side which is reasonably flat, so it can press into the adhesive and hold tightly into it. So if you have something like a marble which is round and shiny, it's much harder for it to stick into the adhesive. Now let's have a look at the tools. For this mosaic, I'm just going to be using ordinary cutting tools that are used for other kinds of mosaic, not just mosaics like this one. So I have introduced these tools in other videos, so I'll link those in the description below. But I'll just introduce them quickly. You've got these Lepinit wheeled nippers. You've got these compound nippers, so you can either use side biter nippers or compound nippers. They do exactly the same job, but the compound nippers are a bit heavier, a bit sturdier, and kind of counterintuitively lighter to use. So I have a pair of these. As you can see, they're well used. Then there are the wire cutters that I introduced you to a little earlier. A spatula for spreading the tile adhesive. I like having a smaller spatula as well, so that this one's just more or less the same as the other one, but it's just smaller so that I can get into, so I can angle it into narrower spaces. It's not necessary, but I just like using it. Tweezers, which I'm never without. They're just to help you pick up fiddly bits if they get stuck or need manipulating into place. And one of these dental picks or anything basically sharp and thin that you can use to scrape away excess adhesive, or they have a range of uses. As I said, the tools are covered in a different video, so I just wanted to introduce you to them very briefly. And then this is the board that I'm going to be using. I've made this board myself out of mesh and tile adhesive, the same adhesive that we're going to be using to make the mosaic. And again, I've done a separate video on how to make this board. And I really like using this board because you can cut it into any shape you like. You wait for it to dry, you cut it with ordinary kitchen scissors. So I'm going to be making a round mosaic. So when I've finished making it and everything is dry, I can just cut around it and put it wherever I want. And this is the adhesive I'm going to be using. Max Flex Fibre Flexible Tile Adhesive for walls and floors. And it's made by BAL, B-A-L. And let me just show you why I like it. It's suitable for swimming pools. It's water and frost resistant, and it's highly flexible. So you buy this in fairly big bags. This is 20 kilos, and I get the white one. But you can also buy it in smaller bags. I think it comes in 5 kilograms as well. Lastly, because I'm going to be using tile adhesive, which produces a lot of dust when you mix it. So when it's dry, it's very dusty, so sort of clouds come up. So I always wear a good quality face mask. And I also am using a silicone little pot to mix my adhesive in, but you can mix your adhesive in pretty much anything. An old yogurt pot would be excellent for the job. And just so you know, I'm also going to be using additive when I'm mixing the tile adhesive. This is a Mappy additive, and ideally I'd be using a BAL one. So the additive is not strictly necessary, especially because I've got the flexible tile adhesive. But I'm working in Scotland, and it's the kind of the winter. So the additive helps prevent efflorescence, which is that kind of white film that you get on the surface of tile adhesive. So when you see me mixing the additive into the tile adhesive, I am mixing it 50% water, 50% additive, and then pouring it into the tile adhesive. I'm going to mix the adhesive now, and obviously I'm going to need to put my mask on, so I'm not going to be able to talk you through this. However, there is another video which does give you a detailed breakdown of how to mix your tile adhesive. I've added about 5 heaped spoons of simple tile adhesive into my pot. And now I'm going to put the pigment in. So I use something called Mortar Tone, and the black one, which you get from a shop called Screwfix if you're in the UK. and I'm sure there'll be equivalent brands if you're outside of the UK. And I don't want to add more than 10% of tone or pigment to the tile adhesive. The other thing you should be aware of is that this is a dry powder and the adhesive is a dry powder, and you want to mix dry with dry. So rather than mix the adhesive first, so it's wet, and then add the mortar, then add the mortar tone, the pigment. You add the mortar tone now, when the tile adhesive is still a powder. So here I am mixing the dry powder with the dry pigment. The adhesive powder and the pigment are now thoroughly mixed, and so now it's time to mix this up with my additive. So remember, this bottle contains 50% additive and 50% water, so it's not pure additive. And in fact, as I said, you could just as well use water. It's simply because it's cold at the moment in Scotland, and especially in my studio, and this additive helps prevent the kind of bloom that you can get on the surface of tile adhesive unless you use additive. So here's my board. It is roughly 10 inches by 10 inches or 25 centimetres square. And I've drawn a cross in the middle just to help me work out where the centre is, because I'm going to be working from the centre outwards. So the point of this video is to show you how to use found and recycled materials. So I'm not really focusing on design or colour or other aspects of the mosaic making process here. So it's really about using the materials and how to apply them into the adhesive. I've also got a bit of tissue paper, a bit of kitchen roll to wipe my spatula when it gets dirty. The process, as you can imagine, is slightly. It's easy to get a little bit of adhesive in places that you don't want it to go. So always have a bit of kitchen roll or a rag or something nearby, so you can keep your tools clean. I've started by taking a little bit of adhesive on the back of my spatula, holding the spatula at a 45-degree angle and spreading the adhesive onto the board, pushing it down. And that's called a scratch coat, and it's just a very thin coat which helps the adhesive adhere to the board. And I've only done this much, even though the mosaic is going to be larger than that, because when you're working with tile adhesive, you only want to apply as much adhesive to the board as you can work with at any given time. So you add on as you work, rather than put all the adhesive down and put your pieces in. Now I'm ready to apply the adhesive to the board to stick the pieces into. And when you decide how thick your adhesive layer is going to be, you need to find your thickest tessera, your thickest bit of material, and consider that you want it to be embedded at least half, if not 2/3, into the adhesive. So this pebble is my thickest piece, and it's about 1 centimetre deep. So my layer of adhesive needs to be about 0.5 centimetre deep. Now I'm applying the layer again with the back of the spatula, but obviously because the adhesive is sticky, it sticks to the spatula. So I'm keep cleaning the back of the spatula in order to create a clean surface. A smooth surface is what I mean. So I'm just scraping the back of the spatula against the ridge of the bowl. Now I'm ready to start pushing my pieces into the adhesive. So my central piece is going to be this lovely little bit of cut agate. I don't know if you can see how beautiful that is. So a Scottish agate. And it's not as thick as the pebble I showed you a minute ago. So I'm just going to put it in the middle and press it down. So I'm just going to put it down into the tile adhesive, and because it's relatively thin, it's going to be flush with the surface of the adhesive. When you're doing this method, you're going to have a very textured surface. So some pieces will be further down into the adhesive and some will be further up. You'll see that as we work. I've done the inner part of the mosaic now, and I'm beginning to work outwards. So I'm adding some more adhesive on, and I'm making the adhesive the same thickness as the central part. So you can see I'm pushing the tesserae, the materials, into the adhesive, but not so much that the adhesive squishes up above the pieces or creates a ridge between the pieces. It's just enough so I have a reasonably flat surface between the pieces where we can see the adhesive. Here's a good example of what to do when you've put in a piece that you don't like. Obviously that's an option when the adhesive is still wet, but once it's dried it's more or less impossible to take out. So I put this one in and this one in, and because the flow is going this way, because it's a radiating pattern, a kind of exploding pattern, you can see the spokes are coming out from the centre. I want this one to actually be going, instead of going that way, to be going that way. So I'm going to take it out. Be really careful that your tweezers don't get, well, they will get adhesive on them, but you don't want to get adhesive on the top of the stone. So I'm going to keep my tweezers nice and clean. And then I'm going to refill that hole. So I did plan what I wanted to do before I started making the mosaic. I chose the materials and I chose the pattern. There we go. If you do get adhesive on the front of your materials, it's probably best just to chuck that particular stone or shell or whatever you're using, because most of these things, like the pebbles and the shells, are porous. So the pigment is going to go into it and it's going to be really hard to get it out. So that's the mosaic almost finished. I'm going to even it up a bit. You can see that around here it's more or less even. So you've got these larger pebbles, two smaller, and interspersed by the shells. And then the outer ridge is quite even, and then it goes in there. So I'm going to even it up, and then I'll come back. Okay, so I've just added a few little bits here and one here to make it even around the edge. I might need to do some there in a minute. Anyway, now I want to show you what to do when you've finished. So I've got all this excess tile adhesive, and I'm just going to clean my spatula again, and taking it at an angle, at that 45-degree angle, I'm going to pull away the excess. And I'm going to add a bit on here. And the reason I'm adding on is because I might want to cut directly around it, right up close to where the tesserae end, or I might like to have a black frame around it. So if I spread the adhesive around the board, it just leaves me that option of doing it either way. So now I've got a very thin coat. You can see that's super thin all around the mosaic, but I've still got tile adhesive right up, sort of slightly bulging. I don't know if you can see that, from the sides of some of the pieces. So for here, if I pulled the adhesive towards me, it would probably pull the tesserae out of place. So I'm going to push, no, I think I need the larger one. I'm going to push that adhesive there in, and then pull, push, push, push. There we go. The mosaic's finished. I'm going to leave it to dry, and tomorrow, or let's say 24 hours, I always like to leave 24 hours, I can cut it, I can cut around it. I could create it either as a square or have a round black border, leaving a rim around it, or I could cut right up to where the materials end. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and if you like this video and you'd like to see more, then please subscribe below.